Lwazi, are we correcting?
Good morning, Chairperson. Yes, we do have a quorum, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Lwazi. Honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, our support team to the Portfolio Committee, the Acting Secretary, the Content Advisor, the researcher, our assistant, and our secretary to the
Recording in progress.
To the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, and all those that are watching our Portfolio Committee this morning, good morning to you all. Last week, we were dealing with the budget review and recommendations report. In fact, we were assessing the performance of the department and its entities' performance. And today we're going to deal with our BRRR, looking at how the department has performed so far, also being informed by the Auditor General's findings in the department and all its entities. We're doing that because we have to ensure that where services have to be delivered, they ought to be delivered. How the money that has been taken from the public purse, which means taxpayers, is being utilized. It has to be utilized effectively, and Auditor General is always giving us pointers where there is something wrong. We ought to probe that. We're doing that because it is necessitated by law. But also, honorable members, this month is the month that we are calling the OR Tambo month, because one of the people that fought for this freedom that we are currently enjoying, I mean, it is enjoyed by everyone, not only the governing party that this man belonged to. That man fought, went to exile, lost touch with the family that he was born to, lost touch with his country for so many years, being exiled, fighting for this freedom. So as honorable members of this Portfolio Committee, in honoring him, we have to ensure that we do our work diligently, because we have to ensure that his dream of a South Africa where services will be delivered, where people will be free, is realized. He may not be with us, but we are all his representative. I mean, even the opposition, because the fact that we are here in this sixth administration is because of the efforts and other people of that man, O.R. Tambo. With those few words, honorable members, I welcome you in this Portfolio Committee today. Do we have any apologies?
Good morning, Chairperson. The only apology I have recorded is from Honorable Van Staden. That's the only apology I have received, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we all know that the department will be with us today. Can we then fly to the agenda? In fact, honorable member, yes,
Honorable Siwisa here. At some point,
yes.
I'm going to leave the meeting because I'll be traveling, Chair.
Okay. Thank you so much, Honorable Siwisa. We are going to deal with the BRRR first, and after the BRRR, we will be considering the minutes of the previous meetings, honorable members. I think you are all aware that the last week, honorable members, from the 10th to 12th, that is, we had full days for 3 successive days. dealing with the performance of public works and its entities. We dealt with the PMTE, we dealt with IDT, we dealt with CIDB, we dealt with CBE, we dealt with Agrima SA. And all these, we're dealing with them looking at the financial year under review, which is 2022-2023. Can we then invite Mr. Denson to present the report?
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, members and colleagues. Chairperson, I just want confirmation that the screen is indeed visible to you.
It is visible, Mr. Tenzin, and I believe it is visible to all other members. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. And a very good day to everyone. Chair, I just need to add that we also this week celebrating World Food Day. I think it was yesterday. And that we are indeed in dire straits when it comes to security in our country, but also in our continent. The world as it stands right now at this time that we are presenting or considering this report is in a relatively weak state. And I think we need to, as we reflect on mandates, legal mandates, and what it is you as public representatives are doing here, we need to just keep in mind how serious this thing is. The projection is that in the next few years, we will struggle tremendously with food. I raise this because this committee that we serve does oversight over the executive, pardon, that is in charge of a department that controls property that is required for food security. And in doing our work, we need to have that broad context. So, Chair, you did sufficiently enough introduction of what we are doing here, and you referred to the legal mandate. We met on the 10th to the 12th of October to consider and assess the performance of the department and the PMTE and the entities. And we are meeting today to consider and adopt this report. Now, we report, Chair, and we say that I have a bit of trouble here trying to, oh, there we go. Apologies. So we report, Chair, because we are compelled by the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act to do this. But it is not a once-off. In other words, we didn't just meet on the 10th to the 12th. We also met right through the year to look at quarterly performance reports of this department and the entities. And in our other oversight actions, everything was linked to making certain that we understand what the budgetary requirements are. We looked at the APP, and in this engagement, what we're doing is we're bringing everything together. We will have a meeting later in the year to look at the legacy report, and you will then see how this ties in with the legacy report as well. So, Chair, Section 5 of this bill, my apologies, of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act says we should conduct reviews of audited financial statements of the departments and entities, and then we should issue recommendations on the forward use of resources. Now, I want to criticize ourselves, Chairperson, by saying that we as a parliament are not strong enough yet to do recommendations on forward use of resources. You may recall as a committee that in the strategic planning session, we reflected on a mandatory oversight, which means that as a committee, we need to move forward, and this committee will certainly do so in the legacy report, making suggestions as to how to strengthen that aspect. And I refer to the aspect of if a department is not doing well with a budget over a particular term or a particular financial year, that the committee has the resources and capacity to actually make recommendations that look at the forward use of human as well as capital resources. The Act requires that we submit this report after the adoption of the appropriation bill, but prior to the MTBPS, prior to the Treasury Minister delivering the medium-term budget policy statement, because what we say in these reports assist the Minister of Finance with that MTBPS. Chair, I want to reflect a bit on this interlinked events that I alluded to earlier on, right through the 5-year term of this administration, where we had weekly oversight meetings, we visited project sites, we had members themselves do constituency office activities. We had meetings with the Auditor General, not only when the department was there, but not only when the budget review recommendation report must be processed, but also you as a chairperson with the Auditor General and myself and Ms. Stephanie as researcher, we have meetings with the Auditor General also to reflect on and to inform the Auditor General of our findings during our oversight meetings, visits, your constituency activities, and it even includes our reflections on questions that members put to the Executive Authority for written and oral reply. So this report is therefore not a once-off event. It is a culmination of a number of oversight activities during the year, and this particular one is a culmination of oversight activities during the 5-year term. So it's an instance of assessing in order to strategically flesh out further steps to accelerate improvement in the work of the department, but also as government, but specifically with this department as the implementer of policy that the Executive Authority makes. In this way, this report is an assessment of the effectiveness and efficiency of how the department used the budget and human resources available to it. I just want to admit, Honorable Siwisa. There we go. So, Chairperson and members, the Act. I'm not going to go through the stipulations that I put down here, but just because it practically what we did in that orange section there, which will not be published like that. It's just for our purpose of presenting to you that we highlighted these orange sections. That will not stay orange, but that is a summary of what the Act stipulates we should do. So the mandate of the department, Chair, we reflected on this quite a bit. The Constitution, Schedule 4, Part A of the Constitution of the Republic refers to functional areas of concurrent and national and provincial legislative competences, and it sets out part of the legal mandate of the department. But Guyama also describes the mandate, but we will summarize it as a department that makes construction and professional built environment policy. In other words, not a department, but the minister does that. Pardon? In collaboration with the deputy minister. But we must also remember that the minister does not make policy on his or her own. It is also a collective responsibility, as stated in the Constitution. The executive is a collective of the president and the cabinet ministers. So they make policy. This department then makes regulations and sets standards. The department includes the PMTE, that is internal component that implements the mandated functions of public works and infrastructure. The PMTE works from 11 offices spread right through the 9 provinces. It gives the department a national footprint, provides construction, maintenance, and property management services to all clients, departments at national level. That is office accommodation, maintenance, the rendering of professional built environment services related to planning, acquisition, management, disposal of immovable assets. But it also pays rates, etc., for the departments, on behalf of departments to municipalities. Since 2019, we also have Infrastructure South Africa that works with Treasury and the DBSA, Development Bank of South Africa, to coordinate large infrastructure projects through blended finance mechanisms. And that inclusion of Infrastructure South Africa means that we as the committee now does oversight also over how the Infrastructure Development Act of 2014 is implemented. And just to say, members, that that act is not an act that has been made, or it's not a piece of legislation that guides Infrastructure South Africa. In fact, Infrastructure South Africa does not have an act. The Infrastructure Development Act of 2014 is a piece of legislation that was promulgated to assist the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission. Infrastructure South Africa is supposed to assist with that coordination part. It's inside our department, and it was made clear to us that this entity works from inside the Department of Public Works to assist with that coordination. It has evolved, and there's clearly new legislation required. That's why we refer here to the Infrastructure Investment Office in the Presidency. We also reflect on how we held strategic planning sessions that dealt with that extended mandate and the demands that it brought to our oversight methodology. So except for regulating the construction sector and professional built environment, the department also has an added responsibility, which is a social security responsibility that deals with the creation of employment opportunities for the indigent in our country. This is through the coordination of expanded public works program projects that's not implemented by the department. It's not managed by the department. It is coordinated by the department and regulated by the department. Implementation takes place through municipalities, provincial and at national departmental levels in different sectors. Chair, then we list the entities, which is Agrima SA, which is our testing, standard setting body and entity that looks at the registration and the certification of non-certified, fit-for-purpose, environmentally friendly, innovative building systems and materials. The Construction Industry Development Board that holds a register of contractors and assists with the development and registration of these contractors. The the Council for the Built Environment that looks after the professional councils, the architects, designers, and all professional built environment professions, and then the Independent Development Trust that has been there from the apartheid era. It has not been transformed in post-apartheid era, and this is something that is a weakness of the department, not only the department, but the executive authority, actually. And here again, collective executive authority, cabinet had to do work on this, and it did not take place. The IDT was supposed to be transformed so that we could have a social infrastructure development agency, and we still do not have that, and that's I think that's part of the problems that we will discuss later on. Then we list the acts. I'm not going to list all of them. We are all well familiar with them. Then the policy texts. These policy texts should all become part of one or two pieces of legislation that gives this department stronger teeth to regulate and ensure compliance. We, as in previous years, we reflect on the department not being directly involved in service delivery, but that it provides accommodation and maintenance services that assist service delivery departments to do its work and serve the people, to improve the lives of all citizens of the country. So this committee's mandate, 42(3) of the Constitution I'll reflect on, and Section 55, 2A and B. The reason why we do this today in this particular meeting is for us to get rid of confusion between the role of the Director General and the administration, management team, and the boards of entities on the one hand, and the Minister and the Deputy Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure on the other hand. It's important because there's often, in the eyes of the public, conflation about what it is this committee does. We are established to scrutinize and oversee executive action. 55 of the Constitution says Parliament must put mechanisms in place, this committee is one of them, to ensure that all executive organs of state in the national sphere of government are accountable to it. And I'm not saying, I should correct myself, not Parliament, I should say National Assembly, because there's a National Assembly committee. And it should do so to maintain oversight of the exercise of national executive authority, including the implementation of legislation and any organ of state, and that is 55(2)A and B of the Constitution. Now, this means, members, that the committee keeps a check on policy leadership and the actions and activities of the Minister and Deputy Minister comprises executive action. And so we oversee executive action and authority, and we use the Constitution and the financial legislation as we continue over the next few paragraphs to just flesh out this meaning in relation to the duties of the DG as accounting officer, but also of the boards of the entities. 4.1 of the PFMA sets out the division of responsibility of the executive authority and the head official of the department. Executive authority is the political head, making policy. It's an important task. It involves translating what the political ideals, the policy ideals are of the country and of this department, so that there's an operational system that are implementable programs that's funded by the budget that's allocated every financial year. The executive authority, the DG, and the top leadership, the DDGs, use the budget and the human resources. They should use it effectively and efficiently to get those policies implemented. And when they do so, they put together an annual performance plan, state their key performance indicators and strategic targets for financial year. They put it in front of us, and we, every single year, we go through that and we criticize them and ask them to make changes. The problem is we do not come back after APPs to check whether they made those changes so that it is implementable and so that the targets are indeed going to make a difference in the lives of the people. So 36 of the PFMA, from Section 36 of the PFMA to about 42, that's the contract of your Director General, of your accounting officer. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but it actually gives effect to Section 217 of the Constitution that says there should be effective, efficient, competitive, transparent procurement systems in departments so that the budget is used efficiently. The word efficient is very important. Efficient doesn't mean anything other than, it doesn't exclude effective, but it doesn't mean effective. Efficient means no wastage. Efficient means if there's wastage, there's corrective action. Efficient means that consequence management is implemented. And consequence management does not mean that people are chased away. It means corrective action. If you suspend it, you are suspended so that you don't meddle in the investigations, which is part of consequence management. So this following portion is very important. The translation of policy that the minister makes is done by the Director General and the senior management. But here's the important part. To ensure that these programs and the use of the budget complies with law, the PFMA stipulates in certain sections, and I will refer to it later, that the minister must receive reports, analyze those reports, and ensure that steps are taken to comply with the stipulations of the law. The minister doesn't take over the role of the DG. Prudent balance is required between the executive authority as policymaker and policy guider and the DG as accounting officer. But we need to be clear. Oversight over what the minister does through the year with the financial reports that comes to him or her is important, because it cannot be that there is maladministration and the PFMA says there should be, and Chairperson and members, I am just going to a document that I sent to some of the members over the years. Oh, what am I doing? This is not the document. I just want to go to the, I don't see it here. Chairperson, this is the important, and members, this is the important aspect. It's the same document. I've got the wrong document here. Any case, I'm not going to do it. It's going to take too long. But what we're referring to here, Chair and members, it is the what we call in-year reports that the DG and the CFO must send to the minister prior to sending it to Treasury. That's the orange that we refer to here, because this is what the legislation that we just went through now, that affects Section 217, puts in place. It says prior to budgetary control reports going to Treasury on the 15th, and I think the 31st of the month, the minister should be informed of those things and should receive explanations for over or under expenditure. But what we just did now also provides an understanding of what executive action means, so that we can have a distinction between policy and administration, policy and implementation. And then we look at what consequence management means. And that is our mandate as a committee, as we give effect to Section 42.3 that says, it doesn't say we must oversee executive action. It says, importantly, it uses two words. It says scrutinize and oversee. And we as a committee need to figure out whether we scrutinize or whether we just oversee. So the real executive action is that of keeping an eye on 5-year strategic plan and its reviews, APPs, the alignment with broad policy of government, that is as an example, the National Development Plan, Vision 2030, which also now we have a version of 2050, the MTBP, the MTBF, medium-term budgetary framework, as well as the annual budget, quarterly performance report. And then, so the first aspect is that of what the minister's office does with a quarterly performance report, what the minister's office does with a monthly report and the quarterly performance reports, and how the minister guides these people to correct things. And we should do oversight over that. So the minister and the department and entities they meet with us, and by the time they meet with us, they should be totally aware of what goes on. We don't get the impression that that is the case. We get the impression that ministers do one thing and department do a different thing. We ask different questions of the minister and different questions of the department. And I think we need to be clear that that's not really the case. The one is the other. It's just that the one is policy and political oriented, but there is a technical aspect to it. So levels of oversight then is important to remember. The office of the minister, and here I have a footnote that really comprises of advisory and support staff of the minister and the deputy minister, and they must keep the minister and the deputy minister informed of matters and recommendations. Why is this important? It is important because program 1, administration of the department, of every department, salaries and goods and services, which will include that of accommodation and travel that ministers and deputy ministers and their staff use, is important. When that is spent, we need to know that that is spent on ensuring policy outcomes of government, policy outcomes of the department. The DG must report, as in section 40, full and proper records of financial statements must be kept, must be submitted to the AG, but prior to that, it goes to the minister. And after the minister has signed off on that, it can go to Treasury. And our committee is the second level. That's the first level. Our committee is the second level. And for me, the Auditor General plays between the executive authority, the department, and ourselves. And I put them there as a third level, but they're very much part of both ours and the minister's oversight of the department. And that is then the levels of oversight. Now, the evidence that we use clearly is the 5-year plan, the APP, the budget, and the quarterly performance reports, the annual financial statements of this that was given in this annual report. As we said right at the beginning, we do this stipulated. We do this in compliance with 5(1)(a) to F of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act. So I am not going to go through the alignment of policy, but Chair, we do have to note that the sector, with the introduction of infrastructure South Africa, the work of PIC, the district development model, all of that is an attempt to ensure that spatial planning and land use management in our country is better coordinated. It's defragmented and it needs to be better coordinated. As the NDP also state, we need to implement this guide that's focused to defeat poverty, unemployment, and inequality. We are indeed in a very difficult situation to do so. That defragmentation has to do with how government is structured according to the Constitution, but this is just a reflection on the attempts to work against defragmentation towards unity. So we stated the following in previous years as well on Infrastructure South Africa. What we have here is a restatement of how the department and infrastructure development implements the Infrastructure Development Act and how it fits in with the PICC. I'm hovering at the top with that bullet there, the second bullet, as not the second bullet here, but the second bullet. Let me just go up. That refers to the secretariat function of PIC. That is some of that 68 million in previous years. It was 68 million. It's probably a little bit more now. That goes for that coordination. Now, if we look at the budget and the annual financial statements, the department underspent, and we need to look at the under expenditure. The budget is as it was allocated, and as it was adjusted. But we need to look at the main vote allocation of 8.5 billion, with which to really implement the policy ideals stated by ministers and cabinet. Now that's an increase, but from the previous year. But what we need to look at is the adjusted amount and how the department used it. And this is what we reflect on from 412 downwards. There's been under expenditure, again, in compensation of employees, goods and services, transfer and subsidies, and machinery and equipment. And so 7.9 billion was spent of the 8.1 billion that was adjusted. So let me just highlight that. So we were allocated 8.5 billion. It was adjusted to 8.1 billion, and the government Department of Public Works and Infrastructure spent 7.9 of the 8.1. Now that's a rate of 97.0%. And the categories where they underspent, and then the explanations that they provide, these are important. So on compensation of employees, we've been singing the same hymn, saying that you need to appoint and retain qualified and experienced personnel. The unspent for compensation of employees was 514 million. There's a 83 million that they say they did not spend, and for me the explanations, as I said, is very interesting. The explanation was it's due to the delay in filling of critical positions during the financial year. I can say to members that if you look at every single year, every single financial year, that is the explanation. My worry, and I think our concern as a committee, must be, why is that seen as a fit, as a correct, as an acceptable explanation? That sounds very similar to a child being given homework at school, bringing nothing, and saying to the teacher, there's been a delay in fulfilling the promise I made to you. It is incorrect. As the chair introduced the meeting, the chair referred to spending the money, how the budget is spent, and whose money that is, where it comes from. It's the people's money. And the poorest of the poor also pay VAT. They also add to the fiscus, even if they don't work. And when we do not use the money, then delay in filling of critical positions is not important. That means the positions, you see, if you say a position is critical, then you must spend the money and get the people, get them employed. Now, if you don't employ people, then your goods and services cannot be spent also. And so you will have 50 million remaining unspent at the end of the financial year on this as well. Transfers and subsidies. It was 6.9 billion. Reasonably okay, because transfers and subsidies, the transfers from program 4 goes to PMTE, and so if we look at the whole budget of the department by at this stage, then the transfers and subsidies where the expenditure is 99% does not look so bad, but and so they only underspend by about 100 million, but even that needs to be looked at, and look at the reason. The reason is, again, delays in fulfilling the conditions due to external factors. Now, we know that the external factors in some cases has to do with non-compliance to the Division of Revenue Act of provincial departments, but and local government in some cases, that the EPWP cannot pay out You cannot pay out as a department unless they comply with the DORA. Machinery and equipment also underspent. It's an unspent amount of 9 million, and the underspending again is explained as due to a delay in acquisition of assets. These reasons that were provided, Chair and members, are not acceptable. The Constitution says that the reports to committees of Parliament and to the National Assembly must be transparent. And I don't think these were transparent explanations that were provided. And I think we need to be much stronger in future years on that. Performance review, we would notice that in the case of disciplinary cases, this is difficult because of the manner in which our employment legislation, Basic Conditions of Employment Act, etc., are designed. They do take longer due to postponements, changes in the representatives of people who are accused, and as stated here, unforeseen circumstances. I don't like unforeseen circumstances. I think they must provide the detail. In the case of EPWP, we will refer to this later on again when we actually deal with the programs, where the branch created a skilled pipeline interventions program. Through that, they created employment opportunities for 1,100 beneficiaries. EPWP produced 4 reports on work opportunities, but there's a problem with the EPWP reporting system, which we will also reflect a bit on later on. The Property Construction Industry Policy and Research branch again failed to produce and table the Public Works Bill. It's the second consecutive, probably third consecutive administrative term, where the only progress that they can report is that they were busy with advice from the state law advisors, and that delayed it. We know as a committee that there has been progress with that bill. The only problem is that progress was reported very late, and clearly that branch is struggling. 4 integrated reports on strategic infrastructure projects, the SIPS projects, that's Infrastructure South Africa's projects. The National Draft Infrastructure Plan 2050, Phase 2 Social and Distributed Infrastructure was delivered to Cabinet. And then the department supported 5 of the planned official state events and additional 7 unplanned events. They supported departments with movable structures that resulted in a total of 12 state events that were supported for the year. Now let's look at highlights. And this is what I meant by food sustainability. The department manages immovable property of government, and therefore it plays a key role in the government land reform program. They reported that 110 parcels, that was 120,997.7 hectares, was processed for release to a variety of departments. These are the 88 SIPs that we just referred to earlier on that was gazetted. And these cover foundational infrastructure networks for energy, water and sanitation, transport, and digital communications infrastructure. The SIPs are that. But they also, the land transfer also cover human settlements and agriculture and agro-processing. We need to, in future years, work closer with agriculture and land reform to have a look at this issue of food sustainability, Chair and members, because we are facing a crisis, actually, a looming crisis. Spending allocated budgetary amounts for transfers, 433 million was transferred to provincial departments. That's 97% of allocated amounts spent. Maintenance of government properties, 2.7 billion was spent on maintenance. Now, I don't know whether that says much, but when you say 2.7 billion was spent on maintenance, remember what it is we're dealing with here. We're dealing with what is called highlights. I am very quick to notice that something like maintenance on properties and an amount of 2.7 billion is raised as a highlight. We need to, it's my duty to alert members to the fact that even though 2.7 billion was spent on maintenance, we know there's a crisis when it comes to government property management and maintenance. So let's not forget that we cannot allow an annual report to be a piece of propaganda. Improved audit opinion. Yes, it improved, but the challenges continue. There's been improvement, which means it's working better with the Auditor General, but it doesn't mean that the challenges have been addressed. It's got the department's got an unqualified opinion, but the PMT not. And there's problems with the as I said, the EPWP report. Infrastructure and construction projects, 3.05 billion spent on contractors and consultants. 95 infrastructure projects completed and 65 sites were handed over. So we need to keep an eye on those 65 sites and what they were for, and what the deadlines are, the end time is for all of those projects. Improved construction project management. The property portfolio of 28,683 registered and unregistered land parcels, 77,537 improvements. That's for buildings and structures. They're located across 52 client departments over the country, and 3 billion was spent on. Let me just fix this. It looks like there's a font change. That should not be there. I had endless problems with font changes as I was formatting. 4.1 billion, there we go. 4.1 million work opportunities against a target of 5 million. Chair, and members, phase 4 of EPWP, by the way, as a program is 20 years old this year. Phase 4 was not focused so much on the amount of work opportunities. Phase 4's uniqueness has to do with skills transfer and certification. So we need to keep that in mind when we see that their performance is only 82% performance achieved. DPWI vacancy rate, there's an improvement from 11% from public service and administration's baseline of 10. That's not much. And I wonder why the baseline is only at 10%. DPWI, built environment professionals and constructions. I find that's what I meant by 1,000 beneficiaries that EPWP as a program assisted with. 18 candidates professional registration in the built environment and 22 artisan trainees that obtained trade certificates in various construction fields. About fighting maladministration and corruption through consequence management, a total of 506 cases of allegations of fraud, corruption, and serious maladministration since 2009. But this is an unfair bit of information that they give us. I wonder what the amount of cases are for this particular financial year, because remember, we're talking about one financial year, not since 2009. So the figure for this year is probably much less than 506 cases. So again, a little bit of playing around with numbers under a subcategory that makes it look good, and then you call it a highlight. I'm again just doing my duty to alert you to that. 16 cases were being investigated. So if since 2009, 16 cases out of 506 cases doesn't look good, It does not look good. Budgetary control, improved expenditure, 97%, 7.9 billion of 8.1 billion of the budget was spent on operations. So we look at the challenges. The rate of compliance low due to disciplinary cases taking longer. We reflected on that. Again, 2% of people with disabilities, that's what meant by designated groups in SAS, senior management post level 13, did not reach that. It never reaches that. And I must say all departments, I've looked at other portfolio committees as well, they all struggle with that. There's a need for government broadly to take that on and coordinate that so that we can have higher than 2%. Incomplete rollout of Archibus, Sage, business process automation, negative consequences. I don't know whether I should say much about this, Chair and members, because we do know that there's been a cumulative expenditure of, look at that amount, 36 million. So I mean, there's 52 million also spent. The amount is not that. The amount is much higher than that by now, and in the coming years, it's going to be much higher. And I you know, when figures are played around with here during particular years, and it's not specific, then I worry. What is more worrying is this. Members may recall that, or if as a committee we look at how debt is written off, what the process is of writing debt off, then I need to alert you to this having to be in the upcoming legacy report. This matter may arise in the 7th Parliament, and we need to keep an eye on it. It cannot be that money is spent in non-compliance of the Constitution 217 that says efficient expenditure and not effective. It says efficient. That money may be lost because when we write debt off, the money is gone, as well as the consequence management is gone. So EPWP achieved 3.9 million employment opportunities by public bodies on that EPWP RS. It had a target of 5 million. It achieved almost 4 million. But the problem with this is that the AG did not trust the evidence that was put in front of us, and this is therefore part of the reason why there's not a clean audit. It is not the fault of EPWP as a branch only. It is also about how EPWP is distributed, defragmented, decentralized across the country, and how EPWP actually do not really have much power. The branch continues to provide technical support to public bodies to increase the labor intensity of projects. It even goes so far as to have discussions with faculties at universities of technical universities to look at how to bring in this matter of labor intensity into projects for engineers and for architects, so that when they are qualified and they work in companies, that aspect raises the possibility of employing more people on projects. Property and construction industry policy and research, I already referred to the Public Works Bill that's not there. The amendment of the Infrastructure Act. That act needs to be amended so that the act speaks more specifically to Infrastructure South Africa, and so that we as a committee can actually do better oversight over that part. But of course, the other aspect that I did not refer to is the matter, no, I did. Well, it's a Public Works Bill, maybe later on. I think I refer to it later on in the report when we talk about the entities. Irregular expenditure, 3.9 million. Now, again, irregular expenditure very often gets written off. But I need to alert members to the fact that 3.9 million looks like the annual, I refer to this in the strategic planning as well. That's an annual package for a particular public servant. There has been 2 or 3 cases taken to the Public Service Commission, as well as to the Public Service Bargaining Council. The Public Service Bargaining Council found that these appointments were irregular, but also that some of the staff were treated unfairly when the contracts were severed. And I think that's an amount that's being kept in the account, and it's not spent because the former minister, took the matter to the Labour Court for review, and that amount needs to be kept until that legal process has been completed. But just to say that if that is a salary, the court may find that amount needs to be higher, and we need to keep our eye on whether that amount is going to grow. Transactions amounting to 46 million included in the balance of 120 million. Those are still similar to the previous one, that has to do with consequence management and labor relations issues that needs to be complied with. 2nd August last year, it processed an application for this is what I refer to when I speak of the process of getting money written off. 188 million was requested. Treasury said it's not their business, it's the acting DG that needs to, as accounting officer, if there was a DG, it would have been the DG. The DG is the delegated authority in line with the compliance framework to make a decision on that amount, and the DG has still not applied her mind on this amount. It did not meet the definition of irregular expenditure. It is therefore classified as prior period error that the DG has the authority, the delegated authority, to make a decision about. That was an attempt to write something off, to write that amount off. The AG's opinions to address irregularities, it remains unchanged. It's an unqualified audit opinion with matters, emphasis of matter and other matters. The emphasis of matter is due to impairment of receivable disclosed in note 10.5 in the annual financial statement, the audited annual financial statement. Impairment of receivables amounting to 77.2 million. It was disclosed as a result of outstanding debt, which have not been recovered. Again, something that may continue to be referred to as impairment of receivables in financial, across a number of financial years, and then you ask for condonation and Treasury writes the amount off. Lots of money that gets written off. We must be very careful of this. Status of material irregularities that was reported in the previous financial year. I just need to explain this, that very often when the amount remains on your book, even up to 2019 to 2019 and 20, the Auditor General may find that and then bring it up as an irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful that needs attention. This is the amount that the SIU is still investigating, and it's in the process of being recovered, this 9.1 million. That's for the payments and state funerals, and members may recall that the disciplinary processes are finalized, and there was a recovery of 0.8 million, but it's not totally recovered. They are in the process of getting that 800,000. In following up on the unfair procurement process on Beitbridge, processes are finalized, employees were charged, it stopped the likely financial loss of 17 million. I would put that on a highlight, not only for the department, but also for this committee. Regarding payments made being out of line with the bill of quantities, and that's still on the Beitbridge, disciplinaries were finalized and people were charged. SIU recovered, is still in the process of recovering 1 million. So that should be 1.8 million that should be recovered in total. Property used by the Department of Defense. The AG reported a loss of 3.8 million that was recovered. Disciplinary actions were taken. Ongoing concern of a weak control environment, however, remains. Lease overpayments on a property used by Rural Development and Land Reform as a department. Financial loss of 10.9 million was recovered. Disciplinary action have been taken. Again, weak control environment in all these three cases. Lease overpayment. And you would notice, members, this is the type of transparency that we need, that lease numbers are provided, but because the lease numbers assists us to actually go further and see where these properties are situated. Financial loss 1.5 of 4.5 was recovered, and disciplinary actions taken. Weak control environment is something that needs to be addressed. Incorrect approval of an extension of time on a magistrate court project, recovery of 3 million, and disciplinary process were reported to be in progress. Incomplete actions that the Auditor General referred to was the Leeuwkop prison. The members may recall that there were some of the equipment that was left out and was not covered up, and that caused some of the material and the assets to be damaged, and it caused loss. You cannot, as a department, leave material outside, even if it's building material. You bought it, it should be protected. In this case, those assets were not safeguarded at that prison, and AXA made a recommendation that the accounting officer did not implement. The department, that was in previous years, the department reported it was still investigation. They were still investigating this non-compliance. The losses are being added or quantified, probably researched and quantified, and they promised to take legal action by the end of January this year. We did not hear much about that. I think they did report it to us, but as I sit here right now, I cannot recall it. Overpayment on bridge materials. It was not paid according to the bill of quantities and delivery costs. The delivery weights and the distance that was paid was higher than the actual weight and distance for the Willis Seasway rural bridge projects, and the auditee has to quantify the full loss. So these are still in process. IDT VAT payments were made late. It resulted in South African Revenue Services instituting penalties and charging interest of 1.8 million. Recommendations were made to the accounting officer to investigate the losses and take disciplinary action against the officials, and it should recover these by the end of this year, December 2023. PMTE's budget, we make a note here that the revenue of the PMTE comes from programs force transfer to it through the DPW, through the main boat. And the PMTE budget is therefore part of it. They use the same supply chain management as Public Works Department. It's really just an implementing an arm. It's not really an entity outside the department at all. So if we look at, again, explanations for underspending and variances per program, real estate management services, low spending due to this is the gist of the problem. There's been a devolution to departments. So the budget for payment of services to municipalities does not lie inside the PMTE. The PMTE therefore must use money to pay services, but the departments do not pay that money back in time. In fact, sometimes the department says, well, you paid something that we don't owe. And so this gives us reason to reflect on two things. One, for what reason can a client department dispute what the PMTE paid, when it paid, and how it paid? The reason is because the PMTE does not have an automated, digitized, trustworthy manner of knowing. What we're talking about here is what we referred to earlier on around Archibus and Sage. That automation has not taken place. You would have noticed and heard the AG saying the PMTE is still doing a lot of stuff manually rather than via the purchased software. I've said already that this might be deemed wasteful expenditure, the purchasing of Archibus and Sage, if this continues. So the PMTE is losing money, but the PMTE reported to us that those amounts were fully recoverable, that's their words, and therefore, because it's fully recoverable, theoretically fully recoverable, they added to their cash flow in their budget. Municipal, I'm just leaving that there. Municipal services expenditure was based on actual consumption by client departments. It usually fluctuated due to factors such as electricity usage, and load shedding, of course, makes it more difficult to quantify because departments also, departments also use alternative energy solutions to deal with the load shedding issue, and therefore you can't really quantify what that amount is. It's very difficult to quantify. I think even if you had the digitized software, it might have made it easier and quicker for you to investigate, but it is an anomaly. It is difficult to do that in the current circumstances. This is one of those instances where we can see how load shedding impacts negatively on all of us. As for the previous item, the PMTE says it's an amount that's added for cash flow projection purposes, not treated as underspending. This shows, members, that the underspending that's reported in the case of the PMTE is probably much higher in reality, because much of what's put in front of us around the PMTE and money, PMTE has very little money. It only has money theoretically. Unspent funds which were allocated for the rectification of illegally occupied properties. I find this a very difficult, my brain cannot get around what this means. The unspent funds which were allocated for the rectification of illegally occupied properties that further contributed to underspending. That matter, again, it tells me that the underspending is much more. But this, for me, the only way to understand it is that illegally occupied properties exist. They are illegally occupied, but not known as illegally occupied. And therefore, when we talk about money, unspent funds allocated for the rectification of illegally occupied buildings, it swells that underspending to an unknown amount, because you don't know precisely how many illegally occupied buildings you have. That bullet actually, if one has to write about that bullet and look for the actual information, I promise you, you would have pages of quantified numbers instead of just one bullet. Construction project management services was reported as a highlight early on. Please note, members, that in our fourth quarter report, not ours, the PMTE reported to us now recently that it completed 59 out of a targeted 125 construction projects. So at the end of the year, it achieved only 47% of its predetermined target. Yet, improvements in CPM, construction project management, is a highlight for the department. It is mind-boggling how that can be considered transparent and honest reporting. In engagement with our committee, again in the fourth quarter performance, The entity provided reasons such as construction projects across the country being stopped by local contractors that demanded participation in projects. They gave this as a reason for why construction project management is difficult, and it truly is. Slow progress due to cash flow difficulties, where if it stopped, small and medium contractors struggle and they really go out of business. Approval of funding by client departments after the projects are awarded. In some cases, contractors requesting extension of project completion time due to late finalization of internet infrastructure installation and access routes required for certain courts and legal offices by Department of Justice and Correctional Services as a client. And we refer to this in the case of the High Court in Mpumalanga, our experience in previous terms. And then in other cases, extension of project completion time due to having to source another contractor, and inclement weather, and in other cases, the inability of a client department giving workspace to the contractor. In the meeting discussing the annual report, these delays were reported in the quarterly performance report, showed that the entity was unable to prevent these from negatively impacting on its expenditure trends. The entity explained that although the difference between allocated and actual expenditure by the end of the financial year might look like an overspending, this is the theorizing that I'm speaking about. It gets offset by underspending on capital items due to the reclassification of projects between capital and operational payments. Delays in budget approvals led to under expenditure, as projects could not be placed on the PMTE's procurement plan without client departments signing off on the allocated budgets and cost of project. In cases where bids were higher than estimated costs and increased the cost of projects, the entity had to request approval from client departments before tenders were advertised. All of these then caused delays. Then there's also the issue of on-site defaulting contractors and subcontractors that do not deliver in accordance to the projected project expenditure that cause delays, and then delays in vacant funded position that contributed to underspending. That is a given. It always happens in the case of the PMT because of the manner in which it's organized. We deal with assets and liabilities. It gives you an idea of the financial position. You can see that it's in a weak financial position. It cannot collect payments that it makes on behalf of clients. It doesn't have the legal mandate to do so. It doesn't have regulatory power. It doesn't have a law that says that it can collect that money, that forces the accounting officers of other departments to pay them. There's been numerous engagements that was reported to us as a committee between the accounting officer of Public Works and the head of PMTE with Treasury. And even then, they could not force compliance on the part of client departments to pay the entity. The entity is clearly in deep trouble. It is not showing that it has money. It actually operates from an overdraft. So it explains the 27% reduction in receivables that's shown in that table as due to the tendency of client departments to pay late. And we can see that this, it also gave a reason here, the Prescription Act that relates to debt on private leases owed to landlords. The Act states that once the relevant time period to pay debt is over, unless prescription was interrupted, the debt may be extinguished. So here's an example, members, of, except for the for the condoning of certain amounts and asking Treasury to write debt off, the Prescription Act related to leases, to private leases, also can lead to financial loss, where public funds get lost to private landlords if we are not careful with this particular property management trading entity. This is why we say there's a need to design lease contracts carefully. And what we mean here is we need experienced property legal specialists that can negotiate leases. There are very few of these in the department, and for this reason, the public funds that's allocated in the budget gets lost, and then gets transferred to PMT, gets lost. Let's just look at the growth spurts in certain cases here indicated from the previous financial year. You would notice a spurt of 20 million in a cash amount from 2022 in that table. We need to just alert members that that's money that came from Kucha. That meant an injection of 707% from the previous year. It was very low the previous year, no money came in there. And this year it is a quick injection that might not happen again. It's project related. In the fourth quarter performance report for this financial year, the PMT reported a bank overdraft of 1.4 billion. This is now 1.8 billion. That's 116% growth. And it's not going to stop. We as a committee recorded our deep concern with this growing debt. It's using this overdraft facility due to actual receipts for the financial year amounting to 15 billion by the fourth quarter. In addition to the budgeted revenue streams, the recovery rate on municipal services is 66% in the fourth quarter. That's very low. It's that 40 and a bit percent. That's the reason. That's probably the growth in the old for the next financial year. Recovery on accommodation charges improved during March 2023, but low recovery of payments from clients saw that overdraft growing to that 116%. Payable from exchange shows that 1.8. It's a 1.8 billion that's due to be written off. There was discussion. Members picked this up, and members raised this in the meeting, and it's a restated from prior year accruals identified subsequent payments. PMTE regular expenditure 161.6 million. 141 million was discovered in current cycle. The PMT reported that it asked Treasury to condone 1.6 billion. Treasury says the DG is the accounting officer to make a decision on the writing off of that amount. 3.8 million irregular expenditure due to prior period errors. That's 2021-22 financial year, and then also an amount of 165 million that included 67 million discovered during this financial year. And so that means it's adjusted to that 67 to include that 67 million for this financial year. So the previous balance is then 67 is added to the previous balance. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure, 46.5 million. That's the beautification of schools project for basic education department. 406,000 discovered in this financial year relating to the previous financial year. Includes 377,000 that was referred. It's a labor relations issue around disciplinary measures, consequence management against officials. Still related to consequence management, 4,000 added in this financial year for finance to recover money from an official that's been charged for maladministration. We go to the entities, and as usual, we start with, for every entity we start with the legal mandate. I'm not going to read the whole mandate. We just know that they are guided by the PFMA. And in the case of the Independent Development Trust, we're referring here to the new board that brought some governing and administration stability. And in this financial year, it therefore operates reasonably well. There's new commitment, guided by the minister and the deputy minister. The board put measures in place to transform and reconfigure the IDT into a fit for purpose and financially viable social infrastructure entity. It is in the process of a reconfiguration process driven by the executive. But I needed to say this, to add this to the report, to ensure that we know that what we refer to here as the executive authority is not the current minister and the deputy minister. It's also something that really started as far back as 1997, that the executive as a collective resolved in previous terms already that the IDT should, and we're quoting the report from Cabinet, should be transformed into a government development agency that is that will implement projects which are commissioned by government. Transforming this entity into such an agency means that the board and treasury and DBSA needs to work together to sort this out, to sort the business case out. We know that it's been completed, but somehow, for some reason, the executive authority is not getting this through Cabinet and does not get the go-ahead for this entity to be strengthened. We need to say, Chair, that in previous years, previous financial years in this term, we noted how critical staff were lost and how this led to low staff morale, but also how it led to weak delivery on the entity's mandate and how client departments just didn't trust that the IDT could do what it did in the past. That confidence restoration is part of the reconfiguration of the entity, and the entity attempted to engage clients, to transform the future organizational form and legal status, to improve information and communications technology, and to expedite human resource capacity that constrains performance. Now, apologies, see there's the brand of the entity needs to be restored very clearly, and chairperson and members, the unfortunate thing is that while this is the preferred social infrastructure entity of government, the committee was a vocal proponent and remains a vocal proponent for this entity as the preferred construction project and social facilitation coordinating and management entity for social infrastructure projects. While there's been improved health, and there are clear efforts to get this entity to a state where it can actually generate funds through its construction projects. We noticed supply chain management improvement. We noticed corporate governance improvements, Chair. But when we listened to the report, there were matters that were raised that showed us that the entity is in trouble. Again, around governance. In response to the committee's request, the minister wrote a letter that I think the chairperson and members may want to reflect on and instruct that some of that is included in this report. We had to include it in the minutes, and it should be in this report. The entity, in terms of audits, received a qualified audit opinion, matters for the second financial year, matters with matters of emphasis. It reported that the basis for the qualified opinion was due to material uncertainty. That's just really documents that were put in front of the Auditor General. That means the going concern status due to cash flow forecasts for the year ending equaling net cash outflow, it showed a significant decline in available resources. And that means you can't trust the financials that much. There's a list of contingent liabilities against the IDT and program liabilities that amount to 1.7 billion. And due to the previous instabilities, you can expect this. But we know that there was a particular year in which the entity could not even produce an annual report. That's how bad it was. The current, I don't know whether I can say current board anymore, but the board that was in place for most of this financial year brought significant improvements. The areas of audit qualifications are listed as unauthorized, fruitless, irregular, and wasteful expenditure. Sorry, I need to make this change, members and chair. That's why I was falling over my words a bit. Unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. So the Auditor General expressed this qualification as the IDT did not, there's evidence that the IDT did not take effective and appropriate steps to prevent irregular expenditure. Full extent of irregular expenditure could not be qualified. In other words, you couldn't find the details, you couldn't find the information. The majority of the irregular expenditure in financial statements was caused by non-compliance with supply chain management prescripts. Effective steps were not taken to prevent fruitless and wasteful expenditure as disclosed in note 22 of the financial statements, and majority of the fruitless and wasteful expenditure was caused by incurrence of interest and penalties. IDT's resources were not utilized economically as required by 57B of the PFMA. Revenue management steps were not taken. Non-compliance with the PFMA was there, and that resulted where you have goods and services received, but you didn't pay for it, but it was recorded, and that results in program liabilities and program assets that's disclosed as in note 5 of the financial statements being understated by 57.8 million. Procurement and contract management. AXA reported that the IDT did not procure some of the goods, works, and services following the systems that's fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective as required by Section 217 of the Constitution and specified by 51(1) sub A sub 3 of the PFMA. Also, this is also the case in the previous financial year, and it means that it was there in the previous financial year. It was clear you had to fix it, and there was no steps taken to fix that. Some of the contracts were awarded to bidders based on preference points that were not allocated and calculated in accordance with requirements of the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. And it was not therefore in compliance with the preferential procurement regulation of 2017. Some contracts and quotations were awarded to bidders based on pre-qualification criteria that differed from those that were stipulated in the original invitation, which then leads to unfairness and non-competitiveness. Regarding consequence management, investigations into irregular expenditure was not performed. AXA could not find sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that disciplinary steps were taken against officials who incurred such expenditure as required by the PFMA, and this was because investigations were not performed. Internal controls, management did not implement adequate controls, and so valid, accurate, and complete financial reporting was not performed, and that caused misstatements in the annual financial statement and the annual financial performance report. Disciplinary hearings were not held for confirmed cases of financial misconduct. Disciplinary hearings were not held for confirmed cases of financial misconduct committed by officials as required. and allegations of fraud exceeding 100,000 were not reported to the police as required by the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. My apologies. Reports on SIU investigations. This is from previous years around procurement, contracting of goods, work services by IDT on behalf of basic education, correctional services, and the construction of new courts program. The IDT reported that the board resolved to commission investigations, two investigations to be conducted by Treasury on allegations of misconduct, my apologies, of corruption, financial mismanagement, and administration. At the time that we drafted this report and that we had an engagement with the entity, it was still not initiated. So what was reported was that it would be done. So if we go to Agrima SA, the committee was reasonably pleased with Agrima SA. We have the legal mandate, mission, vision, etc. The alignment with the board policy frameworks of government is there, and our assessment, we were pleased with that. Now, I think the committee, and in the legacy report we will reflect on this a bit more, the committee gave input to this entity quite a bit, and I think the committee woke up the entity a bit when it comes to put yourself out there and market yourself. And the committee must be satisfied that it had that effect, which is significant in terms of oversight of an entity of public works. The ASA then also reported quite a lot in previous meetings on this eco-labeling system. It is quite a big thing, and it's busy taking off. It undertakes eco-labeling for buildings and products for a renewable period of 5 years. It gets the building gets certified as an eco building if it complies to indoor air quality, comfort, environmental, material, and energy resource conservation. Members who went on the study tour to Singapore would also have noticed some buildings that complies to that type of international standard. Eco-labeling, it also saves energy, and it's very important in the light of South Africa's struggle with energy resources. That will then be incorporated in the department's standard specifications for construction-related works. Once that takes place, it's really going to take off and have a big impact. It's also got an impact in terms of employment creation, actually. Green rating tool for public buildings is related to that also. It's an opportunity to rate the current public buildings. This is also an addition of this entity to the department and the PMTE to improve and to really raise the bar when it comes to how it maintains buildings. Strategic links, we know about the international links. I remember one term we went to Germany and we found some of these entities that were quite on par and knew the Agrima SA quite well. The figures in terms of the allocation per program, if we look at the statement of financial performance and we see what their income and expenditure was, we can see 33.9 million grant that they got from program 4. We see a 1.6 million in assessment fees. There you can see an example of an entity generating its own money, and you can see 1.72 in interest received, and then it recovered 324,000. The operational expenses was 15 million in this financial year. It's an increase of 10 million from the 4.9, say the 5 million of the previous year. And it received an approval to retain almost 23 million, which was a cash surplus from the previous financial year. This entity clearly generates money on top of what it gets from government and is in a good state. No wonder the committee was pleased with it. The financial information shows that it accumulated a surplus of 21.8 million, and its total assets exceeded its liabilities by 22.2 million. And as I use the word cement there, cements the entity's operations for the financial year under review as a going concern. So the performance is therefore as follows: 20 planned certificates issued, 10 out of 12 targets achieved. That's 83% of 100% target. If you put yourself at 100%, you immediately, you look at what you say. 10 out of 12, not bad. You could have done better. We need to look at why they didn't do the last two. Its research and development department developed a feasibility study for the development and implementation of the green building rating tool to rate the use of innovation and alternative building technologies and socioeconomic development imperatives that contribute significantly to the green building policy of the department. Business plan outlining the sustainability of the proposed tool was developed, and it is also part of the Eco SA scheme. That's the eco labeling one. Overall, the organization approved 11 eco ASA specifications that will enable it to issue eco ASA labels on all these categories to promote sustainable development. It generates its own revenue in the form of assessment fees. As we said, it was able to generate 1.6 million in this financial year. It spent 42.1 million of the 59.7 adjusted budget. And the overall expenditure was contained within the allocated budgets. That type of language is good language because it means that you know you shouldn't spend all your money and you should manage your budget and be measured. Underspending on the budget, they speak of its vacancies within the organizations and then delays in finalizing various projects. It's our duty as a committee to ask further information so that they can transparently tell us which projects, where these projects are across the country, etc. 14.3% vacancy rate. 579 invoices paid within the legislated 30-day period. Apologies. One invoice of 78,000, almost 500 rand, was not paid within 30 days because there was a delay in the invoice being submitted to finance. The Auditor General's team did a sample test comparing performance targets. It did this for every entity as well as for the department, and it was pleased that the stated targets in the APP and the indicators in the APP there was sufficient material evidence that they were the same and that they were indeed achieved. AG's audit, this is the unqualified audit opinion. Matters referred to on expenditure management, there can be improvement. Irregular expenditure had to do with contracts being extended without approval. That needs to be given attention. And irregular expenditure amounting to 5.3 million was incurred in the CSIR rental contract. We would recall, members, that this entity works closely with the Department of Science and Technology. The entity, the CSIR, it uses the same test facilities and buildings. The committee traveled there and visited and saw that. And so that's that 5.3 million incurred on that contract, that rental contract. The irregular expenditure reported on note 27 of the financial statements increased by 807,988 from 2.3 million in the previous financial year to 3.1 in this financial year. That has to do with office accommodation identified and confirmed in this financial year, which meant irregular expenditure for the previous year had to be restated to 2.36. This represents an increase of 2.0 million, it was almost 2.1 million in irregular expenditure reported in this financial year. Non-compliance with legal framework, ASA did not exercise significant internal. No, sorry, my apologies. I was gonna defeat what they said. The ASA had significant internal control in place. It limited deficiencies that might have resulted in material findings in compliance. It lacked sufficient controls to ensure compliance with supply chain management regulations that caused irregular expenditure, and that's irregular expenditure from the previous financial year. And that's really material documents that had to be there to show that it was aware of the previous financial year. And it seems like it didn't show material evidence that it was aware of the previous financial year's irregular expenditure. I think sometimes people make that type of error, thinking that the previous financial year is gone. It's not the case. That stuff still stays on the books. Risk management, executive management role to management to risk to manage risk. This executive stated an awareness thereof, and that was welcome, I think. And the components of risk management was the audit and risk committee is there. It's on board. It works, and the report to audit and risk committee provide independent objective assurance. So by the time the Auditor General interacts, that committee has all the documents and all the control measures in place. I'm not going to refer to this commitment again because this is very much the same as throughout. Just an error that I had to correct there. We go to the CIDB. The background remains the same. We are awaiting amendments to the act of this entity, and that is what Program 4 of the department failed in, that I referred to earlier on. The mandate is the same as we know. In the case of this board, there's been stable governance and oversight. It functioned well throughout many years now. The board received policy guidance to ensure development, transformation, and perform regulatory functions. This board and the entity itself in previous years did not have it in place, but again, something that this committee stressed had to be strengthened was this of the National Stakeholder Forum discussions. The organization did quite well with this, and it engages with stakeholders, constructors, etc., throughout the country at these forums, and then brings it into its operational plan. It's got this medium-term objectives around stakeholder forums for the term 23 to 25, which will of course then lap beautifully with the next parliament and the next committee. Apologies. Treasury Central Supplier Database. There's progress in the CIDB linking its online system to Treasury Central Supplier Database. That then eliminates administrative burden on contractors to duplicate documents when they register on the Register of Contractors. The system is now enabling contractors to register at a higher level, at a higher grade, once they have a qualification in construction. This is significant because it assists young people who have qualifications to get in, not at level 1, but 2 or 3. So very, very good to hear that. Performance against performance indicators and targets showed that all 15 planned objectives were met or exceeded. Unqualified audit and completion of 4th year of the 5-year strategy with 5 pillars of transformation, development, regulation, plan, capacitation, and establishing a performance-driven entity. This build program is very important. It generates money from established contracting companies that pays into a fund that is then used to develop lower qualified and lower registered contractors. We are awaiting this amendment act of the CIDB. We hear that it's with the Chief State Law Advisor and Treasury, but we are not pleased that it was not with us already. We wanted to complete these things as a committee, and it was not done, which brings us, when it comes to law, the executive authority really needs to check that aspect up of the program for the department. The construction monitor, members need to really use the CIDB website. These construction monitor and research documents is available, and it will give you a good idea as to construction projects, where they are situated. You can see Gauteng 42%, Free State 19%, KZN 13%, Western Cape and Eastern Cape 8%. Projects split between public and private stood at 85% and 15%, private being quite low. Public sector contracts were around 108 billion, and it's a 65 million rise from 2021. We are very worried. I had a meeting yesterday with a stakeholder that was referring to this issue of private contractors and how they are not busy in construction projects in the country. We're extremely worried about what's going on there, as there's more and more contractors being taken, contracting work being taken away from South African contracting companies and local contractors. Creates tension, and it's not good. Activities during 22-23 showed positive movement in the construction sector. Entity processed 14.2 more application, but these are more lower level, entry level people. Very often your 42.2 applications, it's more than 90,000 people that registered for a contract to be part of the register. Doesn't mean they are working. It doesn't mean they got jobs. It doesn't mean they got bids and tenders. And therefore, you can have a registered company, 90,000 of them, and only 20,000 work. Tenders advertised in the public sector increased slightly to just over 300. There isn't much growth in the sector. It's not looking good. CIDB balance sheet showed evidence of improvement. Income from registers improved from 97 to 140 million. Grants received went up marginally from 78 to 80 million, and finance income rose by around 3 million. Build revenue looks very good. This is really good to see that the private industry is participating in an increased manner. It grew from 62 to 139 million. The AG noted no irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So the internal control system in compliance with PFMA and 217 of the Constitution is very good, and Treasury regulations. CIDB administration team reported 100% achievement on performance indicators. So its focus, agility, and commitment is on par with what it promised to do in its APP. Online applications accounted for 74%. Registration turnaround time improving from 96 to 100%. That's incredible. Its system uptime, it's important as it relies on online capabilities so that contractors can do its thing. It reached 98%. It had a target of 95%, and that system means it's really overachieving. It's exceeding its stated target. National Stakeholder Forum discussions also surpassed that, and it looks at revision of ROC and procurement. High level of underspending, consistently high level of underspending on infrastructure budgets. It's really having a bad effect on us as a country. The entity exceeded the planned number of client departments to be assisted by more than 30, bringing the total to 110. And so in spite of a bad situation, the entity still did well. 71 clients were capacitated. 377 grades 1 to 6 contractors were provided with development support. Stakeholder management, the entity, as we said, is doing well with that NSF. They reached scores of public sector clients and grades 5 to 9 contractors. And so people were made aware of the ROC criteria and the process, as well as the electronic system with which to register. The IDMS, promoting the IDMS and discussing and resolving bottlenecks with flow of funds, the build program, etc. Those things were, the NSF was used to do that. But here's one of the things that we need to really mainstream is empowerment, recognition of women in construction. Not the awards. I'm not so. Yes, the awards are good, and we all dress beautifully and shine there, and photos are taken. But the register of contractors, we need to see more women in construction, and we need to see in every category that figure rises. And it would be good to see in the next APP that there is a different strategic manner in which we record that and which we reflect that, so strategically we can move and progress on that aspect. This shows the revenue from exchange transactions, revenue from non-exchange, build fees, government grants, etc., and the expenditure. And as we said, it looks good, and there has been a growing income both in the build fees and the others. All of that is the same as what I just referred to. The audit opinion we dealt with. It looks good in terms of CIDB. I need to get to CBE. Again, we're not going to do the mandate. Governance issues of this entity. Its fifth term council has now been completed its term at the end of this month. The minister then appointed and inaugurated the sixth term council in January 2023. In the interim, the CEO is now the accounting authority, as the board is moving on. The fifth board is moving on. So, two executives, namely COO and CFO, resigned at the end of July last year. New appointments for these positions started in 1st of Feb and 1 April, respectively, and the fifth term council abolished the company secretary position. The function, they say they find it good to outsource the function as and when required. Measured against the performance, we're talking about performance now, the measured against its KPIs, it performed, it reported an achievement of 83%, 15 out of 18 targets achieved. Outcome 1, good governance, sound financial management, maintaining sound internal control, that's the aim. On advancing transformation as a target, it reported that it developed transformation collaborative committees that guided its contribution to transformation in the sector. Skills and development and capacitation of the state. It talks of assisting 37 district municipalities and 3 metro municipalities. They engage them on the implementation of CBE structured candidacy framework. They also work with the National School of Government on these approved programs. It's not on the go yet, but they are in the process of that. Around contributing to evidence-based decision making, it reported that it developed a final research report on assessment of built environment candidacy programs for the sector, for the public sector, and on issues of governance and public protection. It finalized all lodged appeals within the statutory 60-day period from the date of lodgement. It conducted corporate governance assessment of the 6 councils on compliance, in compliance, pardon, with with the provision of the adopted governance framework. Around incomplete performance targets, the annual target for program 2.4 was not achieved. The stakeholder engagement was hosted in the second quarter, translating to 25% of that target. It resolved that the next sixth term council will take that further. The annual target on program 3.1 wasn't achieved. 36 of 44 district municipalities were supported, and we referred to that just now. And then the annual target for 3.2 was also not achieved. Total of 6 out of 400 work integrated learning students were placed at workplaces. That's 1.5 achievement, and that's certainly not good, especially related to students. One challenge in this program was the sharing of information by universities. They cited pop-year adherence. That sounds as if strategically the CBE did not make inroads into the faculties of those universities. We should speak on their behalf and get that sorted out. The recommendation is for the CBE to enter into MOUs with universities. Now, this is what I meant by the strategic aspect that had to happen. But then also, instead of looking at the universities individually, we should alert the CBE to the fact that you should go to the vice chancellors of these universities, go higher up, speak to the bodies of vice chancellors that exist, because there is such a body, and make input to them so they can take it to the individual councils. Make it a standardized matter, and so that development is key, especially in these work integrated learning matter, because that means that the candidacy program will be weakened if that is not sorted out. Revenue, 54.5 million from program expenditure. It received that grant allocation. It's an increase of 967,000 from 53.5 million received in the previous year. Baseline budget allocation covers operational costs. Received an income from Council for the Built Environment Professionals. Their levies, the amount is 2.1 million. That's an increase of 391,000 from the 1.7 of 2021-22. And it reported that the levies received were lower than it budgeted due to the EXA collecting less in membership fees. EXA is the Engineering Council of South Africa. It's the oldest one, and it's quite a wealthy one, quite a strong one. These are the programs. That's the amounts for the programs in terms of spending and underspending, over and underspending. Treasury approved the CBE's request to retain and utilize the surplus funds for the multi-year contractual commitments and the outcome of continued liability of this financial year. Request for current year surplus is still to be submitted to Treasury. And these are the reasons for over and underspending in administration, economic empowerment, economic development empowerment. These are multi-year. The issue of organizational design, computer expenses, etc., where the actual expenditure exceeded budget expenditure, difference offset against the underspending as indicated in the table above. And then most engagement regarding professional skills and capacity development were conducted virtually, and that resulted in a savings on travel. Research and knowledge management, a suitable service provider, they could not find one. That is very strange, and we will have to keep our eye on that to figure out what happened with that. Public protection policy and legislation, shortfall due to unpredictable nature of appeals committee procedures. These are very similar reasons given to what we found earlier under PMTE and the department. Asset additions, overspending due to leasehold improvements to the leased premises, paid for by the landlord, and prior year committed funds used for cloud migration. AGSA gave it a clean audit opinion, not different from the previous year, in other words, and its procurement spend for this financial year is 84% on historically advantaged individuals and youth. Previous years unauthorized, and this is what I meant earlier on, that very often people forget that the previous years continue. Here you can see it goes back to 2014-15. This is an example of non-compliance with competitive bidding threshold in supply chain management procedures. Council and the management laid criminal charges against the former supply chain management official responsible for this, and disciplinary steps also being finalized against 4 employees who were found to be not guilty in the processes. Related to 5 cases of maladministration, and 2 were found not guilty of negligent practices, and the remaining officials received counseling. I suspect it's not counseling as in psychological counseling, but training to comply and ensure that future irregularities and maladministration do not take place. 3.5 million in irregular expenditure was confirmed after year end. Is something that I'll fix later on. Was confirmed after year end, 29,000 under determination, 439,000 under investigation. Consequence management for corrective action, similar to above around counseling, was being considered. AXA also reported, I will fix this matter here. AXA reported the following instances of irregular expenditure. 4 alleged incidences were investigated. 14 December 2020 report and remedial controls that were recommended in that report was implemented by January 2023. Further case of irregular expenditure identified during this financial year is currently under investigation to determine whether any non-compliance occurred. Draft report was being compiled while they reported, at the time that they reported to us, and so the 7th Parliament will have to give attention to this. Chairperson and members, we included this report a note of appreciation. Apologies.
Mr. Dev.
Yes, Chair.
Oh, okay, I think we.
No, you did not lose me. I just had to take something off my chest quickly. Just Chair, we at the end now. This is the note of appreciation that we put to everyone for the 6th term. It's our final year of scrutinizing and overseeing the executive authority. We had the pleasure of working with 2 ministers and deputy ministers and their support staff. We therefore appreciate their participation, their patience, their responses that they gave to recommendations of our to the recommendations of our work. And Chair, it was quite significant for this committee to get regular reports that went to the Speaker's office, and that was ATC'd for attention. That is significant, and that is important to note, because it means that your work as a committee does have an effect. And I add the ASA, Agrama SA attempt to market its project not only to private people. You can go to all these builders' warehouse and all these other building material places, and you'll find the systems and products of ASA on the shelves. What is important is that it is also marketed and popularized across infrastructure departments such as human settlements, but also municipalities are starting to look at this. We thank the acting directors general as accounting authorities and senior management of the department, the teams of the Office of the AG, the board leadership and administrative teams of the entities of public works and infrastructure. And we look at theirs as a collective commitment and willingness to deliberate and engage with us, yourselves as members of parliament serving in this committee. The committee also further thanks the Parliamentary Monitoring Group and members of the public for their consistent interest and contribution to monitoring government. And we refer to our collective effort to scrutinize and oversee and that this was strengthened through robust collaboration aimed at improving government services to the people. Now, Chairperson, now we need to, if you're patient with me, I'll just find the list of recommendations that we sent to members. Folder. So that we can look at the draft recommendations. And I will now change it so that our eyes don't hurt. Chairperson and members, these are draft recommendations that we put together reflecting on matters that members raised during the committee meeting from 10 to 12. And these are obviously draft recommendations that members sitting, as we're sitting here now, this committee will not have a chance to oversee, but that the next Parliament's committee will oversee. We therefore do not have in here dates for next year, but these may even go as is into the legacy report. So we heard, all of us, the serious concern of the AG on the Parliamentary Village Board. And that is the first recommendation that refers to that. The second recommendation wants a progress report on vacancies across the head office of the department and the regional offices. It asks for a progress report from the accounting officers on responses from Treasury to deal with outstanding balance of debt to the department and PMTE, so that detail of disputes and other constraining matters can be identified and dealt with. That's as was referred to in responses to questions the members asked. We asked for a report on the use of consultants, project managements, and community liaison officers to deal with social unrest and the invasion of projects that cause delays. We speak of community liaison and social facilitation, more effectiveness of it. We also ask for a report by SAPS on this matter, including protection from what is called construction mafias. We ask for a report on a strategy to ensure the appointment of designated groups in the organogram. And when we refer to designated groups, we refer to vulnerable groups as well as people with disabilities, youth and women. We do so because it showed a regression in achieving transformation targets. Report on high vacancies. Report on high vacancies is required and underspending in key programs such as facilities management and asset registry services. That is a worry for us because of the expenditure that was incurred on buying Akibas and Sage, but also due to the high vacancies in registry services of the PMTE and facilities management. We should actually also include here, let me just put it in immediately, otherwise we need to have construction project management in here as well, and if it's somewhere else I will take this out. So number 8 is progress on with the SIU investigation into alleged actions related to the registration of contractors at CIDB offices, 2006 to 2016. Those are old things, but we need to get a report on that. So these things reflect on the books, and it causes problems around fruitless, irregular, and wasteful expenditure. We also ask for a report on the initial investigations dealing with irregularities in lease management at the 11 regional offices to process a presidential proclamation. So that initial investigations, it is here as 9, and I know the answer will be we can't because it must go to the presidency. But the committee can then say we'll have a closed investigation. I mean a closed meeting, because we can do that. But it must be there. The committees of Parliament has the right, according to law, to ask for any information to be given to it, because members are sworn in as people who are trusted. They are honorable and therefore must be trusted with such information. 10th, the CBE must report on the operationalization of the Knowledge Hub, the appointment of management and researchers, the plan to collaborate with research institutions in the built environment professions that could assist the minister to design BEP policies that address key matters. And these are key matters such as a fit for purpose built environment professional, fit for purpose teaching. In other words, we're talking about curriculum change here. Fit for purpose teaching in faculties of built environment professions at universities and private higher education institutions. So these can cover non-standardized, innovative green building material and systems. That's the systems developed by ASA. The matter of labor-intensive building methods that will assist EPWP numbers to go up. Because if architects and planning and design professionals at universities are trained on an alternative costing and time to completion and construction project management, then, and it's labor intensive, then we're talking about a more wholesome, a more unified, strategically unified effort. Demands of large infrastructure project managements that are funded in public-private partnership arrangements. This is about construction project management as a field, as a professional discipline that needs improvement at universities. But also the issue of public-private finance as a component that must be taught. I had interaction with the graduate school business at UCT and some of Stellenbosch University's people, and it is shocking to find that some of the modules are irrelevant, and that they're actually not fit for purpose, and they don't fit for purpose here. We're talking about what's the purpose, what's the policy objective of government. Some of the things are out of sync with government aims, and it's important that these things be picked up. Identification of tendencies and trends emerging in legal cases before courts. This is because Program 4 is weak. It's not doing research. Because if you inform your minister, if your minister is the executive authority, and you have a construction policy branch, it should identify tendencies, record those tendencies, and show your executive authority what is possible and what is not possible in cases of before courts related to FIPDIM and built environment protections. The skills pipeline from high schools, we talk about it from high schools right through to professional registration. RPL is important so that standards and quality is not diluted, but so that the doors of learning are opened for people to enter BEPs, but also so they have work once they are registered. 11, we're talking about progress report, PMTE facilities and construction project management teams, including lead officials and project managements on investigations into all these allegations related to CP mismanagement that might lead to fruitless and wasteful expenditure. We need to even include here, and I'm just saying members need to keep it in mind that this might include the ERP. Quarterly report, progress report on the bill is required, as well as on the amendment of the CIDB. I'm going to make CIDB capital letters so that we can have law that talks about transformation in the professional built environment, but also so that we have law that is applicable in terms of public works as a department and the PMTE being able to get their money that's owed to them from client departments on time. Update report on work by GTAC to reconfigure the IDT into a social infrastructure development and property maintenance agency, but also so it's an agency that serves the objectives of the National Development Plan and broad policy of government. It's you know, IDT cannot continue as IDT. It needs to change, and that's part of what's going on in that board currently as well. That it is unfortunately disheveled, even though it started doing good work. Now there's problems and rifts, and governance is out of the window. Report from the DG, acting DG in this case, but we put DG, and leadership and officials of the branch real estate information registry. This is the PMT that should manage and maintain the immovable asset register. That report should include all relevant information. We talk about the enterprise renewal program here, involving the incomplete rollout of the Archibus and Sage software. We heard that only 2 modules are complete, have been completed, and it should not be the case. Chair, and then the last one, establishment of schedule instead of ad hoc maintenance of immovable assets. I think Mr. Thring will be pleased to see this is here as a key step to prevent maladministration in maintenance contracts across the immovable asset portfolio in order to increase the lifespan as well as increase the value of immovable asset. This is similar to the petition that the Honorable Sello drafted with in collaboration with communities in Cape Town, the Wynberg properties. I think we're dealing with that next week. I'm not sure, but that is what that is. I think that's all 15 of them, and with that, the report for your consideration, Chairperson.
Thank you, Shuaib, for this detailed presentation on the report. The report that we also as members have a chance to go through it. It's not the first time that we're seeing it as you present it. Honorable members, this is our report. I now invite you to comment questions, corrections, amendment, if there are any on the report? Honorable members, I can't, okay. So far, only one hand on my side. Honorable Sihlalo.
Chairperson, thank you very much as I lower my hand. Chair, let me also say thank you to our colleague Shoaib for a thorough presentation on the current state of the department as well as PMTE and the department's entities. I think that it is a true reflection of the overwhelming challenges that have been highlighted both by the AG and by this particular committee. In reports also that I've read of the committee, in as far as going back as early as March, the portfolio committee report that I have, and I think that Shoaib touched on something that is very significant in as far as the current state of unfilled vacancies within the entities and the department as well. And I think that it would be important for us to be able to make sure that going into the 7th Parliament, that it is made very clear that that is what those members who will form part of this particular committee need to be able to look out for, need to be able to allow themselves to be able to hold the department and its entities accountable in as far as the fulfilling of those particular vacancies. But equally, Chair, I think that it's important that we note that, vacancies as well as budgets of the department and its entities must be able to be reflected in the service delivery by the department and its entities. And I think it's fundamentally important that happens. And I also think that the issues surrounding PMTE also need to be emphasized. We cannot sit in a situation where we are losing, buildings and land parcels to illegal occupation because the entity that is responsible to make sure that they are able to service those particular buildings or properties and land parcels does not do so, and despite the fact that they've got the funding to do so. But I also think, Chair, that it's important that we note the many land parcels and properties that DPWI has yet to claim as their own, so that they are able to also then protect many residents and communities from illegal invasion, occupation, or the mushrooming of informal settlement in DPWI-owned properties. I think that's fundamentally important for me, Chairperson, because whilst there is an improvement in some of the entities in as far as their audit outcomes are concerned, as I often argue that, clean audits often must also reflect in the service delivery that they represent to those affected. And I think, Chair, we've done fairly well as a committee to be able to bring about all of these challenges to the fore, particularly given last week's discussions with the AG as well as the department and its entities on what has been the legacy of the department in as far as its challenges are concerned and what it needs to do to be able to address those. So, Chair, I'm very happy with the presentation. I'm very happy with the recommendations as well. And I think that this does actually provide the 7th Parliament, or the committee that will be coming in the 7th Parliament, an opportunity to be able to understand fairly well what the challenges are, and as far as the department and its entities are concerned, as well as what they need to be looking into in making sure that those are addressed as far as the recommendations that have been provided are concerned. Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Honorable Sihlalo, Honorable Van Schalkwyk, Honorable Njobo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to the Honorable Chairperson and members, and thank you very much to our content advisor, Chairperson, for that elaborate report as well as the well-drafted recommendations. I think during the discussions where as he presented, he clearly captured our concerns throughout the years, throughout this discussions that we've had during our engagements. And I think I'll support that. I therefore move for the adoption of the report with the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. Honorable Mjobo.
Thank you, Chairperson. And I would like to welcome the report and thank you very much to the team who prepared the report. Is the true reflection of the last week meetings. And I'm very happy, especially on the issue of the Archibus. I'm very happy with the report, especially on that one, because that Archibus is not doing well. So even the recommendations, I'm very happy. So I'd like to second Honorable Sharon to adopt the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mjobo. In the absence of other hands, honorable members, I would like to add my voice in welcoming this report that has been crafted and captured the marathon of meetings that we had last week. It captured everything that was said by each and every member. So Honorable Sihlolo, Honorable Van Schalkwyk and Honorable Mjobo, they saying the same thing, that it captures the essence of what we discuss, even explained some of the things that we have said. Some of the issues that are in this report are issues that we have been saying over a long period of time. For example, the last recommendation, the very last recommendation, that we must get a report from PMTE on scheduled maintenance. We have told them that they must have scheduled maintenance, not on an ad hoc way, that they do maintenance only because something has happened. This recommendations captures exactly what we have said all along. Even when we had meetings with the department on this issue. On that note, honorable members, I think we take this as our report because the motion has been moved and seconded. So thank you again to our team that compiled the report. Thank you. You have done what you always do of capturing exactly what we said and what were our comments. In fact, even sometimes capturing what we would say, even without saying. I think you understand us now. On that note, honorable members, we have a set of minutes that we need to adopt, not one set, several. Can you, Lwazi, flight the first one? Where is Lwazi now? Thank you, Shuaib. Thank you. This really will also be part of our legacy report as we are preparing for it. Lwazi, Was our first meeting not the one that we had with Auditor General? Honorable members.
You would be correct, Chair.
Good morning, Chair.
Yeah. Remember, we had last week 6 meetings, not 5. The first one was with Auditor General. Then later on, we had with the department and PMTE. The following day, IDT and AGRIMA. The following day, CIDB and CBE. So I think we ought to have even the first one. Or let's deal with this. I thought we were going to do them in an order. What is it, Lazi?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, Chair. I'm trying to load to share the minutes, Chair.
Okay. Can we then have the one of the department and PMTE? So why don't you check those with Auditor General? Okay, honorable members, this is I'm like speaking. I didn't know that I have not unmuted. Honorable members, this is our set of meetings minutes for our second meeting, the one with the department and PMTE, after we had a meeting with Auditor General. Can you just move a little bit up? I just want to check on the apologies. It's so fast. Okay. No, I wanted to, because I wanted to check whether we captured the one of Honorable Zondo, because it came a little bit late, but we have done that. Honorable members, can we then edit, amend, or the minutes, or are they the true reflection of what we discussed that day?
Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Njabo. You move.
I move, Chair, is a true reflection.
Thank you, Honorable Njabo. May I have a seconder, please? A seconder, honorable members.
I will second.
Second, Honorable Tring.
Oh, thank you, Honorable Tring and Honorable Sihlolo, for seconding that we move and adopt these minutes. Okay, let's have another set of minutes, Lwazi. Lwazi, can you put in the correct minutes, please? This issue of yours, putting minutes like
Chair is muted. Chairperson.
Thank you, honorable members. It's good that I kept on my video because I could have continued. These are the minutes of the meeting that we had on Thursday, in which in the earlier part of the meeting, we were meeting with CIDB. Later on, we met with CBE. So, honorable members, may I then have comments, questions, not questions, it's additions, amendments. If there is none, may we then have a mover for the minutes?
I move, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mjabo. May we have a seconder, please, honorable members? May we have a seconder, please?
Chair, I'll second. Member Tring.
Thank you, Honorable Tring, for that. May we then have the minutes for the meeting on Wednesday, where we met with IDT and Agrima SA? Lwazi? Okay. I would like that to check, to confirm, honorable members, when we deal with these, that we requested that we be finished with the issue of the resignations of board members in IDT, and as such, the minister complied, and that written response was shared with all the members. If there is any member that has not yet received that response, we can ask Lwazi to share it again, because I know that also, other than sharing it on our emails, Lwazi also put it on the group WhatsApp. So on these notes, honorable members, can we then confirm whether they are the true reflection or edit, amend, where we feel there is that need?
It's a true reflection, Chair. I move the adoption.
Thank you, Honorable Mjabo, for that motion. May we then have a seconder, honorable members?
I'm happy to second this, Honorable Alexander.
Okay, thank you so much. I had two, Honorable Matebula and Honorable Alexander on this one. Thank you, honorable members. The only set that is missing here are the minutes for the meeting we had with Auditor General, but because apparently Lwazi is struggling to get those, we will then defer them to the next meeting that we are going to have. So we will adopt them next week, Wednesday. On that note, honorable members, let me again appreciate the way that you have interacted and adopted a report which reflects the true reflection of what we did. And in fact, it captured every word that we said when we were dealing with the performance of the department and its entities. Even the recommendations are really what we were saying in all those meetings that we had last week. We really appreciate the work that is being done by our support team in compiling these reports to our satisfaction, and also appreciate that the members, what they are saying in these meetings. I said earlier on, for us to honor OR Tambo is to play this oversight role that we are given as members of parliament to the fullest and be diligent in our work. So today it has been one of those days. In fact, last week, the marathon of meetings that we had, honorable members really showed that we just not rubber stamping here. We are here to ask sometimes difficult questions, but you do that, honorable members. Thank you again for being such a progressive team. I think even the team that will be part of the 7th administration, they will really appreciate the work that we have done as this portfolio committee. On that note, honorable members, take care. Those that will be traveling, because we are having a physical plenary tomorrow, travel safe. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.
Much, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Baba.